What's up guys, welcome back to Life of Bliss. This week I'm going to be finishing up a few things here in the bar. First I need to install my upper cabinets in each one of the corners here, and then I'm going to be going over how to install some LED accent lighting. I'm planning on putting some lights in each one of these upper cabinets so it'll light up these areas. I'm going to be making a bottle shelf in the middle that will have an LED strip that will be shining upward, and I'll also be putting lights underneath the main bar top here. The products I'll be using are from MyLight. I'll leave links in the description for everything I'm using. For a basic setup, the total cost is well under $100, depending on how many zones you want to do and if you want to use your smartphone to activate everything. It can get a little expensive. You could spend upwards of over $200 on these kits just to get everything you want. So I'll go over all the products real quick and then we'll get to installing everything.
First is the LED strip. I ended up getting an RGBW strip because I wanted the whites to look a little bit more natural. Next is the LED controller. This will control what lights are working and what functions are working. You'll need a power supply to plug into the controller, and the remote to choose your colors, brightness, and zones. Next is a few optional things, the first being a Wi-Fi controller to use your phone, some 5-conductor extension wire if you don't want to do one single run of LEDs, as well as some quick connect strips that will attach to the LED strips themselves.
I ended up going with the 24 volt setup with everything, which means my power supply, the box, and the LEDs are all 24 volt. There are 12 volt versions as well, but I'm going to be making some fairly long runs with this, and I wanted to be sure that the current was going to be consistent throughout the entire LED run. First things first, this cabinet will be sliding over here into this corner, and I've got that outlet there, so I need to remove that, cut a larger hole in the sheetrock, and then come inside here and cut out a hole for the old work box.
I started by removing the old outlet and electrical box and made the hole a little bit larger. This allowed me to move the cabinet in place and center the electrical box from my back room. Before mounting the cabinets permanently, I drilled a few holes in the top of the cabinets to run wires. This will make a little more sense later on when you see how I'm going to run everything. Once in place, I was able to complete the electrical outlet. Now for the tedious part, running the LEDs. Here's just a close-up of one of the strips. You can see every 6 inches or so there is a spot where you can cut the line with scissors, and that allows you to either terminate the line or to extend it to another LED strip.
Now after making your cuts, you can either take your end of your LEDs here and solder on the 5-conductor wire to each one of the copper points, or you can get these quick connectors and peel back the paper just slightly and slide them in, and each one of those will hit on the conductor there. And then you can either connect it to another LED line, or you can cut this and solder the wires together, which is a lot easier than trying to solder them on these little points. And then once it's on here, you just close this lid, snap it down, and it will touch that first LED just a little bit, but it's got a nice tight hold on everything and it won't be going anywhere. So here's everything you're going to need once you're ready to start soldering the wires together. Some wire cutters, some wire strippers, some 5-conductor wire, the quick disconnect strips, solder, soldering iron, heat gun, and some heat shrink. I'm going to be doing as much of the soldering as I can outside of the cabinet, so I'm going to be doing it on the table over here, but I'll show you how these LEDs are going to run. First off, I'm going to have them come in through the back room. The power wire is going to come through the wall there, and then there is a hole on either side of the bottom of these cabinets right there, and you saw the holes up top there. That LED strip is going to start in the corner, run its way up the cabinet. I'm going to have some extension wire over the top side of the cabinet, and another LED will run down. An extension wire will then go through the back side down towards the bottom. I'm going to make a hole, and then once I build my bottle shelf, I will have some LEDs running along the top of that. And then the same thing will happen over here in this cabinet. We'll go in through the side and then up and down either side of the cabinet.
The To make extensions for my LEDs, I took the Quick Connect clips, cut them in half, and ran some extension wire in between the two ends. Here's a quick example of how I did that. After stripping the wires, I put heat shrink on to cover the bare wire later. Next, I matched each wire color up, twisted them together, and soldered the connection. Once the wire cooled down, I slipped the heat shrink over the exposed area and heated it up with a heat gun. This is what your end product should look like with no exposed wires.
Another option would be to solder each wire on there separately. I didn't find this was as effective for me because you're soldering very close there. It's not as accurate. You might accidentally cross the leads there. Plus, this is permanent, whereas using these quick disconnects, if the LED lights ever burn out or something ever goes wrong, you can swap out the strips very easily.
So now I just had to come back and do this 50 more times. This is time consuming, but be sure you're accurate with everything. You don't want any connection issues later on down the road.
The next step is to build my bottle shelf in between my two cabinets here.
These are some rough plans that the designer came up with, and they also supplied some matching plywood for me to build the shelf. My first step was to create a base for the bottom shelf. I did this with some spare plywood that I had and connected everything on the inside using some pocket holes. The base was secured by screwing into the back wall.
So the next step is going to be to build the upper bottle shelf. I've got my top plate cut out here. I got roughly where I'm going to lay my LED, and I'm going to take a router and recess that down into the wood, and then take some smoked plexiglass that I got and cover it with the plexiglass so you'll never see the LEDs in there, and that should diffuse the light pretty well for up against the wall and for the bottles. So I just want to go over this top bottle shelf real quick. I've made all my cuts, and essentially what's going to be happening is I'll attach my top plate here to the back plate and front plate, and I've got these little trim pieces here on the side that will be covering up those ends. Here's what I did for the top shelf here. You can kind of see how I routed that out. I've routed out of the center a little bit deeper and then a little bit more shallow towards the ends, because what will happen, I'm going to throw this LED strip in there, center it up, and then I've got to cut down my acrylic a little bit, but the acrylic will sit in there just like that, and paper stain on there so I don't scratch anything right now, but it will be smoked acrylic, and that will cover up the light.
All the electronics will be running underneath the shelf, so I had to drill a few holes to accommodate the wires. Since everything was going to be so tight, the easiest way to connect everything was to directly solder the wire to the LED strip. The easiest way to do this is to first put a little bit of solder on each connection site on the LED strip, and then go back to each wire and add a little bit of solder to that as well. From there, you just need to hold the wire onto the connection site and then heat up the solder until it melts and good connection is made. Before moving on, I hooked up the strips and tested them to make sure they had a good connection. Last, to protect the connections, I covered everything with hot glue.
So just a quick mock-up before I screw the upper shelf down to the bottom, and then I just wanted to show you the inside of this shelf, how I did everything. So essentially I just came back and threw pocket holes and everything and made a little box, and then we will screw everything in from the bottom.
Here's just a quick view of the underside with the top shelf screwed in and the wires fed through.
The last connections I have to make are underneath the shelf here. I will solder those together on either side and then plug everything else in and see if it all works.
So for those of you wondering how the shelf is secured there, it actually just sits on the base, and I cut it long enough to where it has a snug fit in between the two side cabinets. This will allow for easy access to the wires below if need be. The last step was to add the plexiglass strip. For the cabinet LEDs, I clipped them into the quick connects, peeled off the paper backing, and stuck them to the front side of the cabinets. I ended up coming back and putting a little bit of hot glue on these to help them stick because the sticky backing does not really work too well. Finally, I connected the end wire to the control box and added the power source.
Now the question is, does it actually work? Hell yeah. There's the white color. You can dim every color down real low and bring it back up. You can choose which colors you want. Here's just a quick preview of all the colors that it does. It's just an entire rainbow wheel here. Now this one was really complicated with all the soldering that I had to do. The next one I'm going to be doing is just a single strip, so it's going to be super easy.
Now when I was making these countertops, I used a router and a 1/2-inch bit to create a channel for the LED lights to sit into. After aligning the countertop, I made a reference mark for where the wires will need to go through the wall. Next, I cut my LED wire to size, soldered on plenty of 5-conductor wire to connect to the controller, and secured the wire in place with hot glue.
So next I need to install the countertop on top of the bar. For that, I'm going to be using some Gorilla Glue 100% silicone, and I'm just going to be applying that to the supports here and across the top plate, and then setting the countertop into place.
I applied the silicone, centered the countertop, and added some weights to hold it in place while it cured. After 24 hours, I removed all the weights and the countertop was secure in place.
So with the bar top installed, here's how everything turned out. I've got 3 separate zones in the bar area. The first one being the back wall, the second one being under the bar top, and the third being the pendant lights up above. You can make everything brighter or dimmer, change all the colors, and you can also change each zone separately. Now all this is done with the included remote that comes with one of the kits. There's also an app for your phone that you can download and use as well for both Android and Apple. If you do decide to use your phone to control these lights, you will need to buy a $20 Wi-Fi box to use with these. There are some things that you can do on your phones that you cannot do with the controller, such as set times for them to come on and shut off, or a timer for them to stay on before they shut off, adjusting color saturation and things like that. So I did feel that the phone app was a good upgrade. So while I was getting all the lights installed, I was also able to finish up a lot of the trim work, including getting the end cap done on the side of the bar, as well as the crown molding around the upper cabinets. Well, that is it for the LED light install in the bar. I hope it helped you out if you guys are looking to do anything similar. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you guys soon.